You are listening to Frog Talk, presented by Black Ribbon.
Welcome to another episode of Frog Talk. Today, we're exploring how the next generation of financial leaders is redefining client relationships and organizational culture in an industry facing significant transformational changes. I'm joined by Zachary Welborn, shareholder and senior vice president at Mansky Wealth Management and a two-time Forbes Next Gen Wealth Advisor honoree. Zach brings a unique perspective on building trust-based client relationships while also serving as a CFP Board mentor, helping shape the future of financial planning professionals. Welcome, Zach.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. I'd love to start with your journey. I like to just get into, where it all began. Were you like 5 and said, I want to be a wealth manager?
Yeah, no. So that definitely wasn't the path that I thought I was going to land on. But going back to like my college years, I knew that I wanted to do something in finance. Someone told me, many years ago when I was young, if you know how to work with money, you're not going to have any problem making it and keeping it. And I was like, okay, so that kind of led me down the path of pursuing a degree in finance. And I thought that I wanted to do something more aligned with portfolio management that was specifically working for, say, a fund manager or a hedge fund. And I came to find out as I got further into the financial world that, it's a very transactional part of financial services. And, I got some exposure to kind of the client-facing, relationship-based side of financial services, and it really drew me in. And I had an opportunity to start my career here at Mansky Wealth Management a little over a decade ago. And, it was a younger firm, kind of a startup, and it kind of took a bit of a leap of faith. And, I'm still here today, part owner in the company, and wouldn't change a thing.
Would you, was this your first gig out of school?
It was, yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. That's rare, man. That's really cool. What specifically drew you to Mansky?
Yeah. So, going back to my college years, I was out there trying to find internships and trying to get some exposure, things to build my resume, because I knew that I wanted to build a career in finance. And I had several opportunities with other firms, and there was an opportunity here that was more focused on leadership development. And it was an unpaid internship that I took, actually. I was already working 2 jobs, and it's like, well, I'm not trying to make $7 an hour somewhere just to cold call people and, create a list of friends and family, which I got the impression that that's what some of the other offers might entail. And, if it's an unpaid internship focused on leadership, there's got to be some value that I get out of it, since it's not monetary. And, I really, in that internship, I really got exposed to what it means to be a client-facing trusted advisor. I got to sit in, and shadow my managing partner, Chris Mansky, at the time, and, got some real hands-on experience to see what it would be like working in this career. And I was sold pretty quickly. And, I started here part-time while I was finishing up school. And as soon as I graduated, I accepted a full-time offer. And I was, I think, the second advisor hired onto the team, and, never looked back.
That's so crazy, man. So what year were you when you started as an intern?
I think I was still a junior at the University of Houston.
And so how many people were already on the team by then at that point?
there was 3 people on the team. Chris, his background in finance goes all the way back to, I think the year 2000, where he started at Merrill Lynch. And, they're one of our competitors today, but, and they're a great firm, but, I think the corporate brokerage model is very different from the registered RIA, setup that we've got here, for a number of reasons. But, I think that, around 2008, when the Merrill B of A merger happened, there were some things that were changing, and, the writing was kind of on the wall that it was time for Chris to go out and hang his own shingle, and, did away with some of the things that we tend to think are broken with the brokerage world. A lot of it having to do with culture, which, I think really, resonates with you and your mission. And, he created a, great team with, strong values, and, we're growing in the community, and we're really just trying to get out there and kind of change the perspective of, what it means to do wealth management well, and kind of get away from some of the stigmas surrounding, Wall Street and the way things have been done for a very long time.
I'm glad you brought up culture. Obviously, as you know, we focus heavily on culture and brand here, and like perception and reputation, and how that's reflected from inside an organization outwards, and so on. I don't want to get too much into the weeds here, but I'm so curious because it's so interesting that it's your first gig out of school. That's seriously so rare and so awesome. It speaks volumes to, one, your own sort of character. It also speaks to the firm's character. And so I'm curious, in your sort of exploration of looking for opportunities, internships, and otherwise. And by the way, the whole paid internship thing is like a new thing. I mean, paid internship was not a thing like back in the day anyway. And
we were paying a lot.
So as you were exploring different firms at which to work and go learn from outside of the leadership focus, was we always say like brand and culture exist whether you want them to or not. Like it's whether they're designed or not, right? And whether they're intentional. Because if a brand is a gut feeling about something and it's influenced by behavior, then the brand exists no matter what. And the culture is basically your lived belief system. So it's all rooted in behavior. So like, what was it, something, whether you identified it as culture or not at the time, was there something outside of the leadership focus and what you may be doing as, quote, just an intern, that stood out to you, or was there something deeper?
Well, if I'm putting myself back in the shoes of, 20-something-year-old Zach, at the time, having, paid my way through school, there was definitely, the monetary side of things, and, what I would be like, what do I have to gain from this opportunity? That was definitely a big piece of it. And, in interviewing with the different opportunities and trying to get a feel for like, what would I actually gain and take away from this? I think with the other opportunities, you get the name, of, a well-known firm, or, something that, you can put on the resume. But, I was really looking for something that would give me like really a leg up on my competition, and give me some good experience, and start creating that foundation on which I wanted to build my career. And, in my early discussions with Chris, it just became really clear that like, this is a guy that I could follow into, the next, 50 years, working with him. And, it was just very clear that, he's got very high integrity, very high standards.
Yeah.
And that, really resonates in our culture today. I think that, as our team grows, I've got a team of advisors working under me, and my other 2 partners, they've got, growing teams as well. And, I think Chris has really given us a good blueprint to, you know, go out there and, kind of carry the torch
Yeah.
and, build something that we're proud of.
Yeah. That's cool. Because you didn't, I mean, I don't want to be presumptuous, but you didn't expect to stay there like after your internship. The internship was basically a stepping stone, but then you, you loved it so much.
Really, I also kind of looked at it as like, well, let me get a peek into this side of the business, because there's so many different avenues in financial services, whether it is more on the analysis, transactional side, or, the client facing financial planning, wealth management side. And so that, I guess that was also a part of it. I was curious to see, what does this pique my interest? And, it certainly did.
I want to get into your personal, personal philosophies and how that fits into you as a professional, as an expert. So you've been recognized as a Forbes Next Gen Wealth Advisor more than once, twice, possibly even a third time that I don't know about. But what do you think? What is the philosophy that sort of sets you apart and sets apart the, say, next generation of wealth management leaders?
Yeah. So, earlier I had, made a brief comparison between, kind of how we operate, how we see the world, and how that kind of differs from, Wall Street and the way things have been done for a very long time. And, like our mantra here at the firm is every client, every month. And while that means that we put a lot of emphasis on our communication and the way that we interact with our clients internally, it's also how we want to interact with each other and have good communication. And that's been, paramount to just our success as a firm, not just in terms of, assets under management or growth. It's just that, we've really kind of lived that, and it's been kind of the keystone of the arch, if you will.
Then how would you say that, you yourself, and then of course Mansky, I mean, is a well-known brand in this community anyway. I mean, in Houston, the culture is what's talked about, and that's very apparent in its perception, which is the brand. So you also just mentioned that you emphasize client communication, and really an emphasis on internal cohesion as well as external cohesion. So how does that approach, in your opinion or in your experience, impact both the client relationship and your internal team culture, like specifically with examples?
So you're referring to like the communication piece?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I think effective communication is, I mean, it's important in everything that we do, whether it's personal relationships, professional relationships. The biggest problem people have is they listen to respond rather than to understand. And in our line of work, we have to be very good listeners, very good at communicating, guidance and solutions and sound advice. And, I think one of the number one reasons why people leave their financial advisors or make a change is because they don't have good communication. They don't have good open lines with their money manager. And when things are scary in the market, or they're dealing with changes in their personal life or their career, they don't feel like they've got that good open line of communication. So, we're really just trying to take that burden of communication off of our clients' shoulders. And again, I think that also just translates into like how we're operating here internally. Like we use all of the same, like the methods in which we're communicating with people, and like the tactics that we're doing to be good communicators. We're we're doing that, internally with each other. And, from a team perspective, it really allows for a collaborative, culture. Whereas I think in a lot of Wall Street, it's very much dog eat dog. Like,
Yeah.
we're one office away, but we're enemies.
You're cutting
we're
each other's at the
competition.
knees.
Yeah,
Yeah. You're
yeah,
just cutting each other's legs off. I know. That's also like something that I've noticed just in the South. I come from, the Californias and the New Yorks and the Parises and these places where it's just cutthroat and like everyone's cutting each other at the knees. They smile in your face and then they stab you in the back. And
right.
like it's tiring, it's exhausting. And especially when you're doing the same thing, when you're working towards the same goal, it's never made sense to me as a true designer, like through and through. I'm a purist, I'm a design purist. And like my actions are rooted in collaboration. Everything I do is human centered. It's driven by what are the consequences of everything, right? How does everything impact everything, because everything impacts everything. Everything has a ripple effect, literally everything. And whenever people, for example, who don't accept accountability or don't want to feel responsible for others or, want to basically do whatever they want, I always tell them, I'm like, okay, then don't interact with anybody. Just go live under a bridge and you can do whatever you want, because your actions will literally have no consequences. Just go do that. And that's fine. Otherwise, everything you do at any point always has consequences. And so when I moved down here, I was pleasantly surprised. I was surprised. That word, I underlined that word because I didn't expect it. I was so accustomed to this competition, even within fields. But here there's this, of course, it's not, absolute, but generally speaking, most people seem to be if we're going after the same thing, let's go after it together and succeed together. So there's more to go around and so on, as opposed to, because when you consolidate, consolidate's a dangerous word these days, but when you collaborate, and go after something, then two is better than one, three is better than two, and so on, and your creativity increases, you get more ideas, you get more innovative. I mean, these are not new concepts, but people still want to monopolize everything.
Yeah, you definitely, you've got to have that abundance mentality. And I think that supports and allows for that, collaboration in a team setting where, things like growth, there's metrics surrounding these things. And, we definitely want to, be able to support one another.
Do you, are you mentoring anyone? Does anyone work, quote, like under you? Are you managing or mentoring anyone?
Like I mentioned, I've got a team of advisors that, they're moving through the ranks. They're getting out there, building their own book of business and building a practice. And my other two partners, they've got advisors that, so we're mentoring and bringing up that next generation of advisors that, will continue to allow us to grow the firm. And
how does that feel? How do you feel about mentoring?
About 4 years ago at this point where, my practice got to a point where, okay, like I need to bring on some additional hands. Like we've obviously, got our back office here and we've got all the support we need. But at a certain point, in order to scale and continue growing at the rate that you want to, like you got to bring more hands on deck. And so, going from a role where, it's really me running the show to, okay, now I'm bringing other people into the fold and, trying to navigate, how to properly delegate, how to, lead people, how to, properly set expectations, both their expectations and my expectations. It was different. It was very challenging and it's still challenging, but, it's something that, I'm learning stuff every day about, how I can be a better leader, how I can better mentor these folks and guide them towards success. And it's been a blessing having someone like Chris, who he's led, back in his days at Merrill, he led teams of hundreds of advisors and went around the country and trained up folks. So again, he's given us a really good blueprint. I think we've got a pretty good idea of what works, what doesn't work, and it's constantly evolving, and we're always trying to perfect it. And yeah, but overall, it's been, again, it's been challenging, but it's been a very welcome challenge.
Mentoring is, for me anyway, it's one of the most rewarding things.
Absolutely.
Like it's just everything about it. Like when I taught university, teaching classes, mentoring, people who want to, especially people who, like, my favorite part is when you can flip someone from feeling disenchanted or jaded to just totally like feeling like this is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. You've got a vested interest in their success, and seeing that come to fruition, like it's seeing them succeed is no different than me getting listed on the Forbes. Like I'm now more excited when I see them getting recognized, and them making leaps and bounds. It really puts a smile on my face, and it's extremely rewarding.
There's definitely a selfish quality to it for me. Like I always say it's so easy to make me happy. Just follow my advice and then tell me that it improved your life.
Yeah.
Don't buy me gifts. Just, go work out, or, take better care of yourself, or give yourself some grace, like headspace. So what is that? So how does that, what does it mean being part of the CFP, to be a CFP board mentor? What does that actually mean?
The CFP, they've got a pretty rigorous process that candidates have to go through. There's an educational piece where it's usually about a year of classroom work. There is I believe it's a 2-year experience requirement in financial services. And then there's, of course, sitting for the exam and passing the exam. And so the CFP board, they've created this network of CFP alumni that they're willing to donate or volunteer some of their time to help mentor some of these incoming CFP candidates. In those interactions I've had where I've been placed with a CFP candidate, my discussions, they've ranged anywhere from, hey, how do I study for this incredibly difficult exam and pass? Like, how did you do it? To, hey, I've just finished the CFP and I'm going out into the workforce. How do I navigate like just this industry? What are some of the key differences in the big brokerage model versus an RIA model? And I've spent a lot of time just talking with folks and asking questions that kind of get the wheels turning, get them thinking about what is it that they really want out of a career in financial planning. And so yeah, it's been rewarding, and I enjoy having those discussions with folks. And I was kind of just naturally drawn to it because it's something that I'm already doing here on my team, where I've got advisors that are moving up through the ranks. They're going through the CFP program. They're doing the late night, early morning studying, and I'm trying to support them however I can. And they've given me really good feedback. Thanking me that we helped maybe remove some roadblocks and help them get across the finish line. So if I'm able to share any wisdom with other folks that are going through the same thing that we've gone through, I'm happy to do it.
That's really cool. Again, must be really rewarding.
Yeah.
Tell me about robo-advisors.
Yeah.
What are robo-advisors?
Yeah. So
Is it exactly what it sounds like?
So there's a lot of different platforms out there. Robo-advisors come in a lot of different shapes and forms.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's not something new.
What is a robo-advisor?
So in the simplest form, a robo-advisor is essentially an autopilot, hands-off investment strategy.
Okay.
And there's some that are very just bare bones. You answer a couple of questions, you provide kind of a range of your risk appetite, your time horizon, and then there's some automated system that invests on your behalf based on those parameters. And there's some that, it's very like just surface level, and there's others that they get a bit more involved in depth, where they're constantly rebalancing, they're making changes based on where we're at in the market cycle, things like that. But it's nothing new. It's been around for a long time. I think that there's certainly a place for it. I think that folks that maybe they're starting out and they're starting to build a little bit of wealth, and they're saving, they're being disciplined, but they're not quite yet at a point where it makes sense to go out and pay a wealth manager for the detailed sophisticated level of guidance we're providing. So I think there is a place for it. It's a very low cost option, but I don't think in our talks, when you see headlines, robo-advisors, it's the future of investing.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't bother us, because there's no replacement for the human interaction.
Yeah.
And a lot of this business is built on trust.
Right.
And with all of the excitement and also concerns about the growth of AI, and it's been all over the headlines recently. I think that also kind of plays a role in this. I think there's a little bit of distrust in technology,
mm-hmm.
and we use technology every day, but it's nothing more than a supplement to the work that we're doing. There is no replacement for the human involvement in the work that we're doing. And, for folks that they're entrusting us with millions of dollars and their life savings, they want to know that they can pick up the phone and talk to a human being on the other end.
Yeah.
And there's a certain amount of accountability with that as well. And, I have no problem with the robo-advisors. I don't really view it as our competition.
My culture branding program is all about, the root of it is reclaiming our humanity. Like, that's what it's all about, actually. And it's some people snicker when I talk about it, but it's not a joke. Like, we have to be careful what happens in the next 10 years, because we're either going to become cattle to the thing that we just created, or we're going to be able to actually harmonize with machines and work in tandem with it in a way that actually helps us be better at being human. Regaining time, reclaiming time, so that we have more time to just be better, whether it's being more productive or working together or helping others or whatever. And so I really appreciate the emphasis that you place on the maintenance of humanity, or the reclaiming of humanity, or even a better word, a protection of humanity in your space and your workplace. So like, when like you said, everybody's using technology one way or another. If you, in a weird way, if you don't, you're going to fall behind anyway. And it does help in many ways, actually gain more time to do more things, and even learn faster. However, in your line of work, even in the way you mentor people, your teams, and so on, um, how do you sort of, I guess balance is the only word I can think of. How do you balance, the adoption of new technologies with that humanity while maintaining the human-centered approach of your philosophies that really, really get at the root of why people would even want to interact with you?
We are not on the typically the first wave of new technology. We tend to watch from afar, and adopt technology as it makes sense. And it's not a factor of like we're behind the curve. It's let's just pump the brakes a little bit and not drastically change things, or just jump in head first. I think that with any new technology, there's issues. It's never going to be perfect. And again, like I mentioned earlier, there's no replacement for the human factor. And so there's things that we can use technology for to enhance or make our communication more effective or make us more efficient. But I think when you take something that is paramount to the work that we're doing and you replace that with a program or software, the value that you're offering it becomes less and less. And so I don't know if that answers your question. Like
It does.
how
Yeah.
that,
Yeah, it does. I mean, what I heard is that you're significant. You're always emphasizing putting the humanity first, like being human centered first. And then you're essentially using technology as needed to either enhance what you're already doing or just to help, perhaps in efficiencies or otherwise.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. I've got screens all the way across here. When I'm doing my trading, we're using technology, but yeah, it's definitely
Yeah.
a supplement.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the big thing that's, again, that I'm fighting for is the we're in such a fragile place, man. Like the speed at which that AI and machine learning is evolving, humans could never ever keep up. I mean, it's been, again, you and I talked about this, like we haven't evolved biologically in 300,000 years since Homo sapiens stood up, and the dawn of civilization, whatever your time marker is, but at least 6,000 years. Like we're still kill or be killed, animal instincts. The fact that we're afraid of each other's shadows is crazy to me. Like we're, people like bare their souls and their butts online for like millions of people, but then like you can't say hi to the person across the street. It's crazy. And then, and I think like the workplace, my big philosophy is, harmony in the workplace can actually breed harmony in communities. And so I just, I've always just really appreciated your approach and the philosophy over there and the way that you're manifesting that through your relationships into your client relationships, your coworker relationships, and so on. And the big question I always have is, why would anyone want to work with Zach Welborn? Why would anyone want to buy from you? Why would anyone want to work for you?
Working with us, from a client's perspective or prospective client, there's, I think in this industry, again, there's a lot of different options. To your point earlier, there's the robo options, there's the big brokerage models, there's the more boutique RIA style. And, I think it really comes down to, what is the service offering? What is the value add? Because, at the end of the day, in our industry, there's a lot of firms, there's a lot of our competitors, they hang their hat on performance. And while we're very, adept at the investing, we're experts when it comes to investing, everyone knows past performance is not an indication of future returns. You cannot guarantee returns, but what you can guarantee is the service that you're providing. And one of the things that we do is, in a contract, when someone, formally, signs on the dotted line and hires us, we're putting in writing and committing that we're going to be in touch monthly. We're making a commitment that this is the service that we're offering, and it's a bit more hands-on and white glove than, I think what's normal out there. We put a lot of emphasis on the communication, again, because we can't do our job well unless unless there's some humanity involved, unless we understand the person across the table and what they're aiming for, what makes them tick. We put a lot of time and energy into that, and that's really what allows us to do our best work. And so I think it's just that high level touch and communication that is really what sets us apart from our competitors. As far as I know, there's not any other firm out there that, like, they're physically putting in writing and committing to that, communication. And yeah, the investing piece, we've got great returns, but we've got, clients at all ends of the spectrums that have different needs. We don't put someone in, one bucket or two buckets because they've got 10 years to retirement and their risk scale of 1 to 10 is a 5. We put a lot of time and energy into getting to understand, like, what are they actually aiming for, and how do we design a portfolio and a plan that really aligns with that individual or family.
And I just feel like you just instill so much loyalty from your customers, in your customers, and in your team.
I keep going back to the communication, but I think that's part of it. When you think about when you first meet someone and, say you're getting ready to hire them, you don't know them. Maybe you've interviewed them once, maybe you've interviewed them twice, but still going into it, maybe there's still a little bit of, they're still feeling them out. There's still a little bit of apprehension, but that goes away pretty quickly when, you're hearing from that person, monthly, or anytime there's a scary headline, or, there's something happening out there that, could impact you in your life. Like, you're hearing from them with thoughts and feedback before, you even have a chance to reach out and raise a flag yourself. And I think that really helps to build the trust quicker and get to a point where it's like, okay, like, you're my person, you're a trusted advisor. And I think that's another thing that we do is, I've tried really hard to set this precedent, not just in my professional relationships with clients, but, if there's an opportunity for me to add value, say it's, outside of the scope of the work that I do as a financial advisor, but, you come to me and say, hey, Zach, I need a poodle groomer. It's like, well, I want to help find that poodle groomer for you. I want to be a resource. I want to be available and provide value. And I've really tried to, instill that in my client relationships and also my personal life. Like, I just want to be helpful and be a resource for people. And I think that's been a big piece of it as well. It also makes it a lot easier for people to mention our name and get referral business. So.
Yeah. I emphasize the question that I just asked you is my big question, right? Like, why would anyone want to work for you? Why would anyone want to buy from you? And I always reiterate and say, mind the syntax. I'm not asking why should anyone work for you. It's a very different different question. Like, should is I could stand here and tell you all day long why you should be my friend because of all the reasons I think I'm so cool. But like, I don't know why you would want to until I empathize with where you're at, right? And like understand your motives and where you come from and what issues you're dealing with and what, what do you think about when you wake up and before you go to bed and so on. And I think you're demonstrating that you're able quite effectively to do that, and that's very respectable, and I commend you for that.
Going back to earlier, you talking about kind of the difference in the transactional approach versus more the relationship based. When I engage with a new client or bring on a new employee, like I'm never going into it that, okay, this is a quick buck that we're going to make, or this is someone who's going to help fill a quick need. Like when I engage in a relationship, like I'm going into it with the expectation that like I'm going to work with this person or, be with this person for decades. And, I go into every, new endeavor with that approach. And I think that resonates with the person on the other side of the table. And, it creates buy-in on both sides. And, I think it helps those relationships flourish.
To wrap up, if you had to describe the culture at Mansky in one word, what would it be?
I think I already said it earlier, but I would say collaborative.
If you had to describe Zach Welborn in one word, what would it be?
I'll say hungry, in the sense that, hungry to, keep growing, learning, and that translates, to my team. I want to continue to, bring them up and yeah, so
Yeah,
I'm really hungry.
Cool.
And I haven't had lunch yet either, so maybe that's got something to do with it.
Maybe your stomach's just talking. So hungry and collaborative. That's awesome. Okay. What would you like to leave our audience with? If you had to give them advice either on wealth management or, managing quality of life, what would you say to them?
I'll leave you with just some kind of general thoughts on kind of how I, myself and how the team, like how we're kind of viewing the market right now, and just, an approach that I think is common sense and, people can grab onto. There's a lot happening in the world right now. Geopolitically, there's a lot of conflict in different parts of the globe. There's a lot of question marks here domestically surrounding, rates, immigration, tariffs, you name it. There's just a lot of uncertainty. And, at the end of the day, market volatility tends to be driven by uncertainty. People want to know or think that they know what the future holds. And that tends to make folks more comfortable putting their money in the market or investing it. And, I suspect that this uncertainty will, it will subside at some point. But, if we look around at the current market cycle, things are high right now. Almost on a weekly basis, we're hitting record highs. Yet the uncertainty and the fears and the headlines, those tend to kind of continue to escalate. And, I think that it is a good time, for folks that maybe are overexposed in the market. They're fully invested. It's not a bad time to take profits off the table. I always say, one in the hand's worth two in the bush. If the market continues to go up and to the right for the next 2 years, great. We're wrong, but we're wrong in the right direction. We're still participating. We're still making money, but it's a lot better to take some chips off the table while things are high and be prepared for the possibility of a correction or pullback, because I think there's a lot of balls in the air right now that could potentially throw a wrench in things in the next 9 to 12 months.
Thank you. That was super informative. And for me too, that was really helpful. So thank you. Zach, if anyone wants to reach you, what's the best way to get a hold of you?
Well, you can go to manskywealth.com. We've got all of our contact info listed there. You can also find me on LinkedIn. I'm not a big social media guy, but you can find me on LinkedIn and at manskywealth.com. And we make it real easy for folks to get in contact with us based on who they are, prospective client, potential referral partner, or someone looking for a career opportunity.
Fantastic. Brother, thanks so much for being here. It was awesome to have you. And we'll talk soon.